Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Today's video is my July reading wrap-up where I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the month of July. So it has been a super busy month. I've gotten a good bit of reading done in the month of July, but it has been wildly busy. You may know that I've been completing a paid full-time internship in book marketing and publicity. I also took on a new freelance job doing influencer marketing, and I've been trying to keep up with making some videos for this channel and doing some stuff for my patrons, and I have kids. So, it's been very busy. I would say my reading at this point is very heavily audiobooks, not exclusively, but pretty heavily. There are other physical and digital books that I am in the middle of that I've been reading through the month that I just didn't finish by the end of the month, so you'll probably hear about those in August's wrap up. Quick reminder, as you're making your travel plans for the next year, that myself and Izzy from Happy for Now are still co-hosting a trip to Costa Rica, a bookish retreat in January 2026, and the deadline for signing up is fast approaching. For the trip to happen, we do need 5 more people to sign up, so we're really hoping that it'll happen because we think it would be so much fun, a chill, relaxing, bookish vacation in Costa Rica, post-holidays. All of the details you can find are down below. There's still a few early bird spots left available that are at a discounted rate, and it's gonna be so fun. So if you're interested, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and you can go and find all the information at the link down below. But if you're new to my wrap-ups, the way that these work is I'm gonna start by giving you my reading stats for the month. I enjoy the nerdiness of the stats. I know some of y'all do too, but if you're not interested, you're more than welcome to skip forward to where I actually start reviewing the books. Then I am going to talk about books that I read in 3 categories: hits, surprises, and faves. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. In July, I read 15 books for a total of 5,646 pages, which is an average page count of 182 pages per day. This is slightly up from June. I did have a little more reading time, but I would say I'm reading maybe a little more than half of what I was reading when I was just making book content full time, so that's been definitely interesting. In July, 12 of the books that I read were ARCs, or advanced reader copies, that I had for review. I've been heavily prioritizing those. One of them was a reread, one of them was a graphic novel or manga, one was indie published, and I did not read any works in translation this month. In terms of format, I did tell you it was heavily audio. This month I had 12 audiobooks, 1 physical book, and 2 ebooks. That's where we ended up. Taking a closer look at those audiobooks, 3 of them are what I call shelf, which means I had a physical copy on my TBR and I got it off through audio, or mostly through audio. And in terms of where they're coming from, 1 of them was from Audible, 1 of them was from my library, 5 of them were audio review copies from NetGalley, and 5 of them were from Libra FM, including some audio influencer copies. I do subscribe to Libra FM, but also every month they give me the chance to download a few select audiobooks in exchange for mentioning them. I do think they're amazing and a good alternative to Audible. If you want to support local indie bookstores, there is a link down below if you want to go and check them out. Plus, I pay for a monthly credit from them as well. So the books that I listened to were a mix of books that I purchased and books that I got for free. Next, let's look at age demographics. This month, 12 of the books that I read were targeted at an adult audience. 3 of them were YA, and I did not finish any middle grade books this month. This is fairly typical for me. In terms of publication date, the earliest published book I read this month was 2021. I think part of the issue with reading so much less is I am trying to get through so many books that I have for review, and it means that I'm mostly reading new books. I really miss integrating some older titles into my reading. So in the coming months, as I kind of clear the decks, I'm going to be trying to find ways to integrate that more. But I read 1 book that was published prior to 2024, 1 book published in 2024, and 13 2025 releases. So that is the majority of the reading that I've been doing. Y'all know I like to prioritize reading diversely, and part of how I do that is I keep track of benchmarks. Every month my goal is to read around 50% from Black, Indigenous, and person of color authors and at least 25% from openly queer authors. This month the queer authors were a little lower than usual, but also they've been so high all year. I feel like it kind of balances out. This month 20% of the books that I read were by people who are openly members of the LGBT plus community. I will say there were books that I read that had queer characters in them, but the author is not openly queer. So, you know, this is like people where we know how they identify. 53.3% of the books that I read were by Black, Indigenous, and person of color authors, which is great. Next, for genre, we did a lot of romance this month. I read 7 romance books, which includes 1 contemporary romance and 6 speculative romances. Speculative romance is going to be your sci-fi, fantasy, or paranormal romance. I also read 2 fantasy books, 2 mysteries, 1 contemporary fiction, 1 dystopian fiction, 1 historical, and 1 horror. So a little bit of a mix there, but pretty heavy on the romance, I would say. Lastly, let's take a look at the Read What You Own challenge. It's not going well, guys. Another part of the issue is I'm not actually buying very many books, but because I'm still getting sent a lot from publishers, like my TBR just keeps going up, even with what I'm reading. I would love to get it under control. I will have a gap in full-time employment between when my internship ends and when I hopefully find my next full-time role. So maybe I can kind of get ahead on some things. We'll see what happens. I'm doing my best. So as of the end of July, I had 250 books on my audio TBR. This is up 19 from the beginning of the year. 67 books on my Kindle TBR, which is up 3 from the beginning of the year, and 475 books on my physical TBR, which is up 22 from the beginning of the year. And the physical one is the one that I really want to get down. So yeah, I need to do something. Maybe in the time that I have, part of it might be like a taste test project to see books that have been sitting on my TBR that I try them and I'm like, yeah, this just like isn't for me, and that could clear the decks. I don't know. We'll see. I gotta figure that out. With that said, let's go ahead and get into talking about all of the books. We're gonna start with my hits, and this month there were 5 of them. One of those is a reread, and this is a book that was one of my favorite books of the year it came out, and I'm happy to say that for me, it did continue to hold up. I know this is a controversial one people have strong feelings about, but it is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I love this. This is my favorite book in the ACOTAR series. People have real strong feelings about Nesta. I have talked about this in the past. I have like a whole reading vlog about this, and there will be a live show for the Mass Effect readathon, which we are winding up. We've only got 2 books left to read after this one. Been doing it for like a year and a half, which is wild. But the live show for this, I think, is going to be August 10th. So tune in. I'll create a link so you can go find it. So if you want to hear us discuss Court of Silver Flames, that should be fun. But my reread went well. I still really love this book. My next hit is Taste the Love by Corellia and Faye Stetz Waters. This is a book I had for review from NetGalley, and I really liked it. It's a sapphic contemporary romance, sort of second chance adjacent. They weren't in a relationship, but they did kiss once when they were finishing up culinary school. So this follows 2 chefs, one of whom has a very fancy bougie restaurant, and the other one who owns a food truck that's been award-winning. And they get into a bit of a debacle when the food truck lady wants to buy some property to create a haven for food trucks. The other one doesn't like it, but then big food corporations sweep in and try to buy it out from under them. So they have a marriage of convenience to try and undermine what the food corporation is doing. So it's like a modern marriage of convenience with 2 people who went to school together in their early 20s, had a kiss one time, and now are like 30-somethings reconnecting. And I really liked it. I thought it was fun. I liked the characters together. I also thought the ending was very satisfying. Yes, let's take down the big corporations that are causing a lot of problems. Yeah, this was a hit for me. I enjoyed it. Next is Coffee Shop in an Alternate Universe by C.B. Lee. This was really delightful. It's got cozy vibes, but I wouldn't call it cozy fantasy. It's like cozy adjacent. It's a YA book that kind of takes this idea of the AU coffee shop from fan fiction and then turns that into a story. So we have a sapphic romance at the center of it, two teenage girls who meet in a coffee shop that has almost a portal between universes. So we have one in our world and one in this magic adjacent world. And it's both a slow burn queer romance and also has stakes of them trying to save things and figure out what's going on with some nefarious plots. I don't want to get into the details or spoil anything, but I really enjoyed this. It was cute. It was sweet. It definitely feels like a romance written for teenagers, but one that I think other people could enjoy. Real cute. It was a hit for me, and I did have that one for review as well from NetGalley. The next hit is another one I had for review. Keep in mind, like, the majority of the books on this list are books that I had for review. There were only a few exceptions. This is We Don't Talk About Carol by Kristen L. Berry. It's a debut mystery that I think is great, and I kind of hope it turns into a series. I feel like it has series potential. So this is a cold case mystery. It's about 6 Black girls that went missing in the 1960s from a neighborhood in North Carolina. And in the modern day, there is a woman who finds out that she has an aunt that she never knew existed because she was one of the girls that disappeared, and so the family has just never talked about her. She's a former reporter who's married and is going through IVF and has complicated feelings about motherhood and what that might look like because of her own upbringing, and decides that she's going to investigate and wants to figure out what happened to these girls. So it's got kind of true crime vibes, but for somebody who has stakes in the case. And one of the things that I think this points to and that talks about is that in missing persons cases, Black people are overrepresented in the US, and yet they often receive the least amount of media attention. Most of the time when there's missing persons cases, it's young white women that you see. And so I think this shines a light on that, and she does investigation and is able to uncover what happens. I thought this was fantastic. I really loved it. I think it's a very strong debut. I would recommend it, and I hope that it continues on. The ending definitely leaves it open for series potential, and I think it would be great. I would read more from this author. Really good. The final book in my hits category is The Memory of the Ogisi by Moses Osei Utomi. This is the third and final novella in the Forever Desert series. I had a copy sent to me from Tor.com, so thank you to them. I have loved this entire series, but I think this wraps it up in such a way that kind of blew my mind and made me rethink the series and makes me want to revisit it at some point. It's hard because we're so far into it. What can I say? So these are novellas that have almost a myth or fable-like quality to them. They are African-inspired fantasy that have a lot of subtext that they're getting at. And this book in particular is dealing with our ideas of the other, treatment of immigrants, treatment of people who are othered by society, also ideas of propaganda and who gets to tell history, and the way that history can be perceived really differently from different sides. So I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I think it's a little up in the air whether you consider this book a prequel or a sequel to the other 2 books, which is a really interesting way to do things, but I loved it. I think it's fantastic. The whole series is really good. Definitely recommend. With that said, we're going to move on to talking about my surprises, and this month there are 5 books going in the surprise category. The first one is Soundtrack by Jason Reynolds. This was so good. This is one that I had as an audio influencer copy from Libra FM, and it is an audio only production that is a full production with music and sound effects and a full cast, and it's very cool. It's YA. It's a coming of age story following a Black teen boy in New York City who loves music and loves the drums and wants to perform. And so in one sense, it's about the band that he ends up getting together and them performing in the subways of New York and gaining a following. But there's also a lot of behind the scenes things happening because his mother has an abusive boyfriend and she chose the boyfriend over him, and so he moved out and is now living with his uncle and is dealing with some difficult things behind the scenes with that. There's friendship and tragedy and a lot of great social commentary woven into this. I think it's fantastic and the production is incredible. So I call it a surprise because I knew it would probably be good because it's it's Jason Reynolds, but I wasn't expecting it to be this whole audio experience complete with music, and it was just really impressive. I liked it a lot. Would recommend. My next surprise is Lore of the Tides by Annalise. This I had as an audio review copy from NetGalley, and I call it a surprise because often I find that second books from new authors are not as good. Like, the sophomore slump is a very real phenomenon. Whereas in this case, I feel like I actually liked the second book better. I think some of the issues with the first book in terms of pacing and the vibe of the book being consistent throughout are fixed here, and it's a very satisfying conclusion to the duology. I really liked this. So I would say that if you at all liked Lore of the Wilds, which is book 1, Lore of the Tides is definitely worth picking up. I think it's a really good romantasy, and there's not a lot of Black authors getting published traditionally writing romantasy at this point. We really need more of it. But yeah, I really liked Lore of the Tides. I think it was an improvement in terms of those issues of tone and pacing, and it was a fun, satisfying conclusion to the story. My next surprise is Lord of Population by Elizabeth Stevens. This is a book that I read for an Author Picks My TBR video project I did, and I can link that video up above if you haven't seen it. Lizelle Sambury, who writes amazing YA sci-fi, horror, and fantasy novels, gave me 3 books to read that had not been on my radar, and one of them was Lord of Population. And y'all, this book was a wild ride. Like, it was not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but if you like a bonkers kind of dystopian paranormal romance that gets a little intense at times, this might be one to pick up. And it is another one with a Black author. This is indie. So the main character is a young Black woman set in this dystopian future where these aliens who kind of, the aliens, to me, the vibes of them are sort of like Fae meets vampires. Like, that's the vibe of what they're like, but they're from another planet. So aliens have taken over Earth, humans have been subjugated to them, and she's just been trying to survive with her found family and a girl that she considers to be like her sister. But then the sister is kidnapped by a very creepy alien predator, like child predator, and she wants to get her back. And she ends up teaming up with a guy who is part of this alien species that, again, they're like Fae meets vampires is the vibe, and things kind of go from there. I think what's interesting about this is it is both very sexy and very driven by the action. So it's like breakneck action speed and then real steamy scenes, and then like some real bonkers things happen. It does deal with trauma. There's abuse, there's sexual assault, abuse of children, although like the worst abuses of children are not on page, but there are some other things. I did put some content warnings in my Goodreads review of this, but despite that, I'm like coming away from it being like, I think I liked it. It was a really wild ride, but it stuck with me and I'm still kind of thinking about it. And even though I think when I finished it, I was like, would I continue with the series? I don't know. Now I'm like, maybe I would keep going with the series because I'm kind of curious what happens next. So this one was a surprise for me, and yeah, maybe check it out if that sounds up your alley. My final surprise of the month is another book I had for review. This is What Fury Brings by Trisha Leveneller. This is coming out in September. I had an early copy from the publisher, and I got invited to an event where we got to meet the author and hear her talk about her intent for the book, the thought behind it, why she wrote it the way that she did. And that, I think, was really interesting context that was helpful for me. I was skeptical of this book at first because it does some things that are definitely uncomfortable, but by the end of it, I actually quite liked it. I do think this is going to be a very controversial book, a very polarizing book. I think some people are going to hate it, and some people, it's going to be their new favorite thing. So what is it? It's a kind of different take on a romantasy, but it flips the way that gender has often been done. So in this world, our heroine lives in a matriarchal society where basically all of the forms of oppression that women have historically and still today experienced by the patriarchy, those things are experienced by men. So it's kind of reversing sexism and gendered oppression. Editing Bethany here, and one thing I forgot to say about this book that I think is an important thing to to know when you're talking about a book that is dealing with gender in this way is that she does account for trans and non-binary folks in the world building. I won't go into too much detail, but basically, like, the people who are being oppressed are cis men, specifically. So, you know, like, that can get a little weird and people might still have issues with it, but I appreciate that she considered that as an issue. So she is from this society and is one of the two potential next queens. She's vying for power with her cousin, and in order to shore up her position politically, it's time for her to find a husband. And so she has to go to a neighboring kingdom and abduct a prince of that kingdom and make him her husband, because this is how they do things. And so she goes, but she accidentally abducts the wrong prince. Instead of being the youngest prince, she abducts the crown prince. But he doesn't tell her who he is because he's worried it can make things worse. So there are some really uncomfortable things that happen in this book, especially done by the cousin, who is a villain, I will say. Like, she does some things that are horrific in terms of things like taking 13-year-old boys into her harem, domestic abuse stuff. And our main character doesn't do those things, but does do other things. So, like, there are some scenes where it's like kind of questionable consent. The power dynamics are definitely not the best, but I also kind of see what she was doing. And one thing that she says about this is she's like, listen, heard people say this is a feminist book. This is not a feminist book. Feminism is about equality. This is not. This is something that she wrote out of anger at the way that women are treated and have been treated historically, and wanted a way to put that on the page while also making it a romance. And I think there are people who are not going to like this. It's not going to be their thing, but I think some people are loving it. I have some qualms about it, but also by the end, I did like it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess it's also worth noting for men who are found guilty of sexual assaults in their kingdom, there's a guillotine used for their genitals as punishment. Like, there's a lot of things in this book. It is a wild ride. Not going to be for everybody, but I feel like people are going to be talking a lot about it. And I was surprised at how sold I kind of was on it by the end of the book. So an interesting one. Maybe take a look. I missed one. I do have one other surprise. This is a graphic novel I had for review. It's called A Bite of Pepper by Balaz Lorenz. And this was really darling. YA sapphic romance with a vampire heroine, except the vampires in this story are a little bit different than your traditional vampires. And she was born as a vampire, but to become a full vampire, you have to turn someone or take a bride. And her mom is pushing her to do it so that she becomes immortal, and she doesn't want to because she just wants to do skateboarding. And then she meets a human girl at a party, and they kind of like each other and develop a friendship. But it was surprisingly very cute and sweet and thoughtfully done, and I loved it. I definitely recommend it. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to my favorite. There were 3 books that are making the favorites category. One of those is getting 6 stars, which is a favorite of the year. The other 2 are favorites of the month. First up is Hemlock and Silver by T. Fischer. I had this for review from NetGalley, and I think it comes out later in August. It's fantastic. Not at all what I was expecting, but so good. And why am I surprised? T. Fisher's books are usually good. This is another one of her kind of unusual takes on a fairy tale retelling. So this is a Snow White story told from the perspective of somebody adjacent to what's going on instead of the central characters, and really reframing it in a totally different way. Without giving too much away, the main character is a woman who has always been obsessed with poisons and finding antidotes for them. And so the king hires her to try and figure out why his daughter is ill. He thinks maybe she's being poisoned. And so she starts trying to figure out what's going on with the daughter, and ends up happening into some things she did not expect. There's a really interesting use of mirrors in this, and mirrored worlds, sort of. Can I say that? It's like not really too spoilery, but yeah, really interesting use of mirrors in this. There are poisoned apples, but in a different way, and it's really good. There's also a cute little side romance between our main character and a guard who's assigned to her, and it was great. It was creepy. I feel like it's horror light, so people who want to dip their toes in the horror genre but don't want anything too scary, this could be a great option for you, and a completely unexpected and fresh take on a Snow White story. So really good, definitely recommend it. That was great. My next hit, I actually did a little standalone review video for, which I can link up above, that is spoiler free. It's very quick, but this is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I am hit and miss with Taylor Jenkins Reid, but I did love The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and this one also piqued my interest. It is in fact a love story, a sapphic love story, following a young woman during the 1980s space shuttle program who gets recruited by NASA to go up into space. And I won't say too much about it because, again, I do have that review video that gets into the details. So if you want to go check that out, I'll link it up above. But I really love this. It made me cry at the end. It definitely hit harder than I was expecting it to. And it's just so beautifully pulled together. So I would call this in some ways a romance, but also something that is about NASA during that time period, about being a closeted queer woman in the 1980s in a space where you can't come out. And also there's family dynamics that are really interesting woven in. So phenomenal, definitely a favorite for me. Loved it. Oh, and I did get a copy for review from the publisher. Lastly, my final favorite, and the one that is making my favorites of the year list, maybe not a surprise, this is one of my favorite authors, The Bewitching by Sylvia Garcia. So good. I always love her books, but this is definitely among my favorites. It's like witchy gothic horror that's multi-generational, and it is really good. I did have a copy from NetGalley, and I had an audio review copy from Libra FM, but I also purchased a hardcover myself, so do with that what you will. I had it in some formats for review. But y'all, this was so good. So we have one perspective that is early 1900s Mexico, following a young woman who's coming of age with her family on her family farm. She's being courted by a farm boy, but she dreams of the big city and of the luxurious things in life. And she has an uncle who's staying with them who is relatively young and attractive and is kind of grooming her, and then weird paranormal things that start to happen. Again, I don't want to give too much away. Then in the late 1990s, we're following a Mexican young woman who is a grad student. She's an international student studying in the Northeast, and she's doing research on this little known female horror writer from the 1930s who wrote a story inspired by a real friend of hers that went missing when she was in college. And so she gains access to the journal of this writer, and we get excerpts of the journal from the 1930s and weird things that were happening then, and those things start to mirror weird things that are happening in the character with the 1990s, and all of them sort of weave together. It is super creepy, it's brilliantly told, and as always with Sylvia Garcia, there's a lot of depth and nuance to the themes she's exploring. It's dealing with privilege and taking advantage of people, uses of power, immigration, and identity, woven through with this combination of Mexican folklore and the history of witchcraft in the Northeast. And I thought it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I think her work is brilliant, so this was definitely a big hit for me. So there you go. Those are my hits, surprises, and faves for the month of July. There were some great books this month that I picked up, and so far I'm starting August strong, so I'm hoping it'll be another really good month. If you reached this point in the video, leave me some kind of a spooky emoji in the comments down below, or let me know any thoughts or feelings on what I talked about. For your question of the day, tell me a book that you wish would be made into a series. I think We Don't Talk About Carol would make a really great series. Is there something that you've read that you're like, okay, this is a standalone, but like really it should be a series? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, it always helps if you give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.